Hello and welcome back to the Matrix Green Pill podcast. Today I am thrilled to welcome Ananda Shakespeare, founder and CEO of Shakespeare Communications, a distinguished public relations firm based in Dubai. Ananda is a former journalist and passionate advocate for ethical communication. She brings her rich expertise in corporate and consumer PR to our conversation. Ananda, welcome and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Hilmarie.
To get our audience to know you a little bit better, can you please give us a little intro about who you are and a little bit about your background and how you ended up in the UAE?
I'd love to tell you a little bit about my background and how I ended up in the desert. So I'm a British national. I was born and brought up in the UK. I have lived abroad a few times before I moved to Dubai. I lived in Brussels and I worked for someone who worked for the EU. I have also lived in Finland as a student, and I went to the University of Lapland and did a diploma in Arctic studies, which not many people can say they've done. I've always wanted to be a journalist. My stepfather was a Fleet Street journalist, and that's, I think, where the passion came from to go into that industry. I got into journalism straight after university. I studied at Manchester Metropolitan in the UK, and I've worked for BBC Radio 4, Ideal Home magazine in the UK and many others. And when I've worked in Dubai, I've worked for the likes of Time Out Dubai and Middle East Economic Digest and many more. So it's been a great career in journalism. But as you know, I did make the move to public relations later on.
So when did you come to the UAE, and was it for a specific job or did you just explore?
I first came to the UAE in 2004 to visit my sister. She was a journalist and she conceived and launched a magazine called Viva, a women's magazine, which is now defunct. She worked on Aklan, the celebrity magazine, and then launched Harper's Bazaar Arabia. So she was working for one of the largest publishers in the UAE, and a job came up with the Time Out Group. I got an introduction via my sister. I was interviewed in London by the then editor, and I was up against journalists from The Guardian, which is a national newspaper, a broadsheet in the UK. I landed the role. And in 2005, I gave up my wonderful London life, where I used to party with rock stars and celebrities and had a great social life in London. I left that in 2005 and adventured to Dubai.
Amazing. And like so many others, you fell in love with Dubai and ended up staying all this time. So it's just about 20 years that you've been in Dubai.
That's right. 2 decades goes in a flash.
So then what inspired you to make the transition from journalism to founding your own PR agency?
I call myself the accidental PR because I never thought I would leave London, and I did. I never thought I would leave journalism, and I did. And actually, I was taking a sabbatical from Middle East Economic Digest. I was there as a journalist for about 6 years, and I took a career break. And someone recommended me to a real estate firm to do PR for them. And I took that client on 10 years ago, and they were still with me 10 years later. That one client then snowballed to others because I was recommended by that client to other clients. And that's how Shakespeare Communications started. So I always wanted my own business. I was never really sure about what that would be. But of course, there's not a huge leap between journalism and PR. It's a well-trodden route of journalists moving to what we call the dark side. I had the skills to deliver to clients already, but running a business, of course, is very different to being a journalist. So it's not for everyone. There's a lot of great communications people out there, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a success at business.
Business is a whole different kettle of fish than working for somebody, there's no doubt. What lessons from your journalism career have been most valuable in running Shakespeare Communications?
I think I'm very deadline driven as a former journalist. I do like to deliver work and deliver work to deadline. So I'm very deadline driven, as I said. And I think that's very helpful. I'm a real producer, a real production person. So for example, in my days as a journalist at Time Out, I was very dependable. If someone was off sick or wasn't delivering, I would pull an all-nighter and I would make sure that content got to the printers in time. You have to really be able to pull out the stops and make things happen. You have to be a real producer, I think, in business and in journalism.
That has been very helpful in running PR agency. And I guess your knowledge of how journalists like to receive content and how they like to be communicated with would also be very valuable being on the other side of the table.
Yeah, indeed. It's very helpful to know and understand exactly what journalists want, so down to the very details. So it does aid communications, and it does mean that we are the queens of getting coverage for our clients. But of course, PR is more than that. And also, I know some great communications individuals that don't have a background in journalism, but it does seem to be that most of the really outstanding PR professionals do have a background in journalism, but not always.
It does help to have that insider's viewpoint or that insider's knowledge of how to approach and how to get the best out of that relationship with journalists. You've been around, well, Shakespeare Communications has been around for 10 years now. Congratulations. That's an amazing milestone to have reached.
Thank you.
It is 10 years, right?
Yes, on and off. Formally from around 2019 but on and off from 2014. I left my journalism job around summer, I think 2015. The company started, I think, around December 2014. It is 10 years in some form.
10 years officially from 2014. It's a fantastic milestone. So congratulations on that. How has the PR landscape changed? Or should I even say the communications landscape changed since you launched the PR agency? How has the landscape changed in the Middle East? Let's start with that.
So there's definitely more of a shift towards digital and influencer-led PR. There's more data-driven PR now, but still an emphasis on storytelling and authenticity. I mean, social media is increasingly important. And I think those are some of the ways the landscape's changed since 2014. And some of those are similar to other markets as well.
And as a former journalist, do you think that the media relations landscape has also changed, or has media relations evolved? How does that impact PR professionals today?
There are less journalists around than there used to be, I would say. Journalists are increasingly busy. We're all oversubscribed in our daily lives with communication, with emails, with WhatsApps, SMS, phone calls, and so on. To be able to get any time or response from an email to a journalist is harder and harder. Those media relations are incredibly important. So, of course, people like myself have worked with many journalists. You know, when I was at Time Out, my desk was next to the team at Arabian Business. And yes, journalists move on. It won't be the same people I worked with in 2008 that necessarily are there today. For example, a lot of these journalists, if they stay in UAE or the region, over 20 years, you've developed a lot of relationships and you know a lot of people. So I think those relationships, what are really, really important to media relations. There's lots of ways that you can aid that. And I think that's quite important to new people coming into the business as well. I do feel that a lot of PR professionals, you know, are working from email. And I'm an old school journalist. I used to be on the phone, ringing up, getting those listings for Time Out. And sometimes you do need to get on the phone and you do need to see people in person. And for some of the younger generations, they don't necessarily want to communicate in that way. A lot of work is done by WhatsApp in this region, which isn't perhaps considered that professional in somewhere like the UK. But this is how we all communicate here. It's very fast paced. And if you can go out and network through industry associations and any opportunities that are out there and meet journalists, then that's really vital to helping your clients. You know, tomorrow evening, I will be soiree with Arabian Business and one of my clients. And of course, I'm going to see the team from Arabian Business tomorrow. So you have to make that effort. Outside might be an event in the evening like it is tomorrow. So you really need to spend time networking. I think that's vital, and not always be at your desk.
There's nothing that can replace face-to-face interaction. It's a lot easier to build a relationship when you're there in person and you can sense the person's mood. You can really get to know them that you cannot do if it's just a WhatsApp or just an email. It's definitely so critical to look for those opportunities. And of course, it's very difficult. We know journalists are incredibly busy. As you said, there's fewer of them. They've got strict deadlines. They're trying to do a lot more they might have done 20 years ago. Their time is valuable, so it's very hard to catch them in person, but then to look for those opportunities, as you said, where are the networking opportunities? Where are they going to be in person? And then look for those opportunities to create an opportunity to have that face-to-face interaction with them. I think that's very valuable insights.
Yes, and then you can personalize experiences for them. If you have a deeper knowledge about an individual journalist, you know that journalist likes surfing, for example, and you've just taken on a surf client, which, happened to me a few years ago, then you can invite that journalist to come and try a new surfboard and things like that. But if you don't go out and really develop those relations, you're not going to know that that sports journalist has a passion for surfing,
Yes, exactly. And also, it's that thing about building relationships. It's hard to just reach out to somebody who you've never spoken to or really never have met. When you've gone and you've met them, where there was no expectation of them doing anything for you or vice versa, then when the opportunities come down later, it's a lot easier to approach them.
Precisely. Always go over and above. I'm always connecting journalists with other PRs as well. So if a journalist is looking for something and it's not something you can deliver, do you know somebody else in your network that can help that journalist with that story? And they'll always be very grateful to you for helping them and come back to you for help from your clients.
Yes, that makes absolute sense. Do you have maybe a memorable or even challenging campaign that you've worked on that you could share with us?
I think the most memorable client that I've worked with is Seven, which is Saudi Entertainment Ventures, which is part of the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund and the PIF. And they launched cinema into Saudi Arabia after 35 years of no cinema. We predominantly worked on that and the theme parks they were rolling out with the family entertainment centers, which was a really big cultural shift for Saudi Arabia. These family entertainment centers, they might not sound very exciting to us, but to suddenly have these, massive malls with places to eat and go to the cinema and perhaps with a theme park attached and all over the country, not just in Riyadh. Something like that is pretty groundbreaking and special to be part of.
Yes, that is incredible to be part of something so big, something that's really changing how they approach entertainment in Saudi. A fantastic experience. Amazing that you were part of that project. So, wow, incredible.
That was enjoyable. And it was great to be part of COP28 as well, representing a client there, launching a sustainability book. And of course, we love to work with plant-based clients and brands like acai brands and pop brands, and they really resonate with us. I'm known for being a vegan advocate, so we do tend to get quite a lot in the vegan and plant-based as well. So it's always awesome to champion clients that you find personally really ethical.
That makes absolute sense because you're passionate about that already, about vegan. You're passionate about being vegan. It does help, and to translate that passion over to clients and the projects that's close to your heart as well. So having that cultural fit, being on the same page is very valuable, and the client will feel that in the way that you're working with them and their campaigns.
Yeah, brands really do rely on us, don't they? Sometimes for extra insight and of course for our regional contacts as well.
What advice would you give to someone looking to make that career change from journalism into public relations? Because as you say, that happens quite a lot, going to the dark side.
Oh gosh, definitely have lots of advice. I do try and mentor as much as I can, not necessarily on a regular basis, but I do try and have coffees with anyone who is interested in making a transition either from journalism to PR or for perhaps in-house PR to going out on their own. Again, networking is key. It's very easy to set up a business in the UAE. The ease of doing business is fantastic. As I said, there's a lot of people out there that have a lot of knowledge about communications in this region, which is fantastic. But where's your business going to come from? You've got to have a very broad network to win business. Coming from journalism to PR is when you're a journalist, you really have one boss. And when you have a portfolio of clients, you can be pulled in many directions. You're servicing lots of accounts. You have to be very good at client management. It's not good enough to only get clients' result. You've got to have that rapport, that chemistry. You've got to understand their needs, sometimes hold a client's hands through certain things. So client management is a really important skill, which you might not necessarily have coming from journalism. You can leverage your storytelling and your writing skills, and you can build those networks and also go to industry associations and do courses to help you transition, which I did. I did a diploma in PR basically and did a lot of transitional courses to make sure that no one could ever say I didn't have that knowledge, because I transitioned from one industry to another, I made sure that I skilled up. And of course, communications is fast moving. There's a digital landscape out there. So you have to keep learning new tools all the time. I'm doing all sorts of things like attending ChatGPT workshops and so forth. And journalism has really changed anyway. Back in my day, it was beginning to go much more digital. You have to be able to do podcasts and vlogs and put content out over social media as well as do your digital and your print work. So although there's lots of similarities between the industries, there's also lots to learn. And for me, learning is one of my key values. So I enjoy learning new skills.
Excellent advice. A lot of tips there for sure. Upskill, do the extra courses, have a good network. Is there any benefit for somebody making that transition to start off in a role within an existing agency or to go straight out and freelance by themselves?
You're quite right. People do both. I think having an agency background and not just working in-house is quite important because you learn so much. You continue to learn with every client you have. So you can't replace experience. The best place to learn about PR is certainly in an agency because it's fast-paced. You're working over a variety of clients. If you work in-house, you're only working perhaps on one client, one brand, one project. I would say if you can, work with an agency first before you go out on your own. I think that would really help, especially understanding client relations and so forth. I think it's hard. A lot of recent graduates want to go straight out on their own without having that agency experience. And I think sometimes with younger individuals, they don't necessarily have the maturity for the client relations, because sometimes I get phone calls and this happened and how can I manage this? And of course, I support from other individuals out there freelancing. But if you've been out there and you've done your time in an agency, then that's going to help you enormously.
I think anyone that's ever worked with students who's come right out of uni into a job, they'll tell you after 3 months or after even less than that, they'll say university did not teach them anything about the real world. And what they actually do on the job has got nothing to do with what they learned in university. So yes, of course, an education is important, but that hands-on experience, you can't replace that and you can't bypass it. And as you say, if they go into an agency where they have the opportunity of working with many different clients in many different industries and see how fast-paced it is, that will help them to prepare if being a freelancer or being an entrepreneur is on the cards for them.
Yeah, and I have taught at a university in Dubai. I have taught social media and PR. And so I understand that a lot of it's theory-based. This is why internships are so important. But actually, the younger generation are quite reticent to come and do internships. So unless they go out and have those experiences, like you say, there is a gap between what students are learning and what's actually happening in the workplace. So internships, experience, again, vital. So I'd really encourage the younger generation to come and work with us. We're not scary. We want to mentor. So take the plunge, be brave. We remember what it was like to be straight out of university and working for the first time.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights and those excellent tips. I'm sure our audience will find that very valuable. Now we've come to the segment of our show where I'll ask you some rapid fire questions, our version of a game show. Are you ready?
Okay.
If you could have dinner with any historical figure, living or dead, who would it be?
Oh, wow. Okay. I'm not prepared for these questions, but I would say perhaps Mahatma Gandhi would be very interesting.
What's one quirky habit or ritual that you have that most people don't know about?
Oh, gosh. Well, I am actually quite spiritual, and I don't know if many people know about that. Recently, I've started chanting. So I chant in the morning. Sometimes I meditate, and I've started journaling recently. Those are some of the activities I'm doing in my private life. And it's very important to be mentally strong and have that morning routine before our busy PR days start, I think.
Very good. I did not know that about you. So yes, thank you for sharing that. If you could have a superpower for one day, what would it be?
That's a difficult one. I mean, it would be great to do good, wouldn't it? If we could eradicate world hunger or something like that. But I think telepathy would be a fun one, to know what everyone's really thinking.
That would be interesting. Or a fly on a wall, another interesting one. Very good. Thank you for that. If you were stranded on a deserted island or desert island, what 3 items would you want with you?
Oh, tea, I'm a massive tea drinker. Books, I love to read. Tea, books, and perhaps music. I love music.
Very nice. And my last question. What is one thing that you do every day, no matter how busy your day gets?
I do try and swim every day. Wasn't something I used to like so much, but since the pandemic, I've got into swimming in my older years.
Excellent. Thank you for playing along. That was easy enough. Now I'd like to ask you our signature question about your green pill moment. What was your green pill moment, the action or event that was the turning point for you or your career?
I think this is a really important question and a good one to answer and share with the audience. So for me, I was working as head of comms at a telecoms company. Head of content rather. I went out on a Saturday morning. Our weekends back then were Friday, Saturday, and I was going sunrise biking in the desert in Al Qudra, which I love to do. And I fell off my bike and I fractured my ankle in 2 places. Yeah, you would think, what a terrible, terrible thing to happen. Well, it was pretty terrible. I had clients flying in that day from America. I had communications meeting on a Saturday afternoon. I pat myself on the back. Luckily, it was my left foot. I still drove my car to the hospital, half an hour away. Someone brought a wheelchair out, took me into the hospital, got bandaged up, bought some crutches, and I went back home, and then I continued to go to my PR meeting on crutches in a Uber and carried on. But there were lots of great things about that. I ordered a meal plan, so I didn't cook. It was like being a princess. I could go to the mall and use a electronic wheelchair. I got taxis everywhere, so I could get dropped wherever I was going. The great thing about it was I was actually working full time for someone else at the time. And I didn't know how I was going to get through that week because I accidentally started building up clients on the side and was earning more money than my well-paid day job and was fearful of taking the leap from stable job to running my own business. What I realized when I got signed off to heal my leg was that I could just sit and work all day. And whereas I was working after work and before work and so forth before, I realized at this point, I already had a business and I was able to come off leave and hand my notice in and focus on Shakespeare Communications full time. And that was back in 2019, just before the pandemic. So things were booming in 2019. And of course, 2020, we lost contracts. It was a very different year. My first full trading year was 2020. And from there, you can only build and rise because obviously that was a difficult year for everyone. So if you can start a business in in a recession, not that it was a recession, but they were difficult economic times, then you're probably going to do well. You've got now a team of about 7 people, but most of that is through sheer hard work, long days, 16 hours, weekends for the last few years. So if I can do it, anyone can do it. And I'd really encourage people to live their dreams and consider starting their own business. It's very rewarding.
After the hard work, after you've got that first success and you can start seeing the results of all that extra hard work, it's fantastic. So being forced to slow down and being forced to stay in one place and not being able to move showed you the way. It said, okay, now it's time. You've been building slowly on your side hustle that you've now been able to take full time. Like you say, if you could survive the pandemic, you can just survive anything. It was certainly a challenging time.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your fantastic and inspiring story with us. I'm so sure our audience is going to enjoy this conversation as much as I have. Before we say goodbye, could you please tell our listeners where they can find and follow you? And we'll also put this in the show notes.
Oh, yes, of course. I'm most active on LinkedIn. So Ananda Shakespeare or Shakespeare Communications. Those are my most active social media. Of course, you can find me on shakespearecomms.com too.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you so much for being here today. I wish you and Shakespeare Communications all the very best.
Thank you for having me on the show, Hilary. Thank you very much.
And to our listeners, if you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to share it with your friends, subscribe to our podcast, and leave us a 5-star review. Your support means the world to us.
If you enjoy our conversations, please like and subscribe. See you next Wednesday.